Hello everyone, and welcome to the CircuitPython weekly meeting for January 27th, 2025. It's the time of week where we get together to talk about all things CircuitPython. I'm Jeff, and I'm sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython, which is a version of Python designed to run on tiny computers called microcontrollers. CircuitPython development is sponsored primarily by Adafruit, so if you want to support Adafruit and CircuitPython and folks like me, consider purchasing your hardware from adafruit.com. This meeting is hosted on the Adafruit Discord server. You can join anytime by going to adafru.it/discord. We hold the meeting in the CircuitPython Dev text channel and the CircuitPython voice channel. This meeting typically happens on Mondays at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, except when it coincides with a U.S. holiday. In those cases, we generally push it one day later. In the notes document, there's a link to a calendar you can view online or add to your favorite calendar app. We also send notifications about upcoming meetings via Discord. If you'd like to receive these notifications, ask us to add you to the CircuitPythonistas Discord role. I already mentioned the notes document. If you're watching this after the fact, it'll be linked in the show notes. This is where you can contribute notes that are relevant to the meeting, especially for the hug reports, status reports, and in the weeds sections. If you're watching it after the fact, I've added timestamps so you can easily skip to the part of the meeting that interests you the most. And if you wish to participate but can't attend, we'd still love to hear from you. You can leave your hug reports and status updates at any time during the week, and the host will read it out during the meeting. So this meeting is held in 5 parts. Next up, we've got community news. I'm going to take a quick look at some things from our very own Python on Microcontrollers newsletter. We'll cover Python, MicroPython, and CircuitPython. Next up, after that, the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. We'll look at some numbers from GitHub and other sources that give a quantitative overview of the whole project, separate from our individual status updates. Then we get to the fun stuff. We will go in a round-robin fashion 2 times. First, we will do hug reports. It's an opportunity for anyone to highlight the good things the folks in the community are doing. We think it's really important to take the time to recognize the awesome folks in this community. Then, status updates. We want to hear from everybody. How have you been using CircuitPython or developing CircuitPython since the last time you were able to drop by? And what do you want to get up to in the next week or couple of weeks, depending on how often you drop in? And then the 5th and final part is called In the Weeds. If we need a longer form discussion about any topic, this is the time to do it. You can just add your topics there as soon as they come up, and we take them in the order that they are in the document. So now that you know how the meeting will go, I am going to transition into community news. I'll tell you a little bit more about where these come from, but these are some Python-related picks that I thought were really interesting. So first up, FOSDEM is one of the big open source and free software conferences, and MicroPython will once again be joining forces with Esperino at FOSDEM, which is February 1st and 2nd in Brussels. Their table will be in building AW, and they'd like to show off your projects using MicroPython. There are also a couple of talks by Jan Nordby, and thanks to him for getting those links into the channel. Next up, we've got some projects and playground notes. So I spotted this one. It's called Upcycling an Air Quality Sensor, and Anne made it the project of the week. Using a PM2.5 sensor pulled from a broken smart air purifier, Daniel James created a simple 2-component CircuitPython-powered air quality monitor using a Raspberry Pi RP2040-based Adafruit KB2040 microcontroller board, and there are links to Hackster.io and a couple of other sites with more details. Then I picked out one of the new notes from the Adafruit Playground. This one is titled Adventure Engine, Mapping a World in a Neo-Trinky. Neo-Trinky is one of the more limited CircuitPython boards we have, but the author of this note, whose name I don't have, Mr. Klingon, wrote like a map that you can navigate around with north, south, east, west type commands, and made it real tiny. So I thought that was cool. Then in another section, we had news from around the web, and there were a series of CircuitPython school segments by John Gallagher, I believe, Professor Gallagher at Boston College. And the one that I picked was Bring in the Noise, playing WAV files in CircuitPython on a circuit playground. But there's actually a whole series of videos they're linked from the newsletter. And that wraps up kind of my top picks. There are a lot more in the CircuitPython weekly newsletter. It has a couple of names. The Python on Microcontrollers weekly newsletter, I think, is the most official one. It is a community-run newsletter emailed every Monday. It kind of centers around CircuitPython because that's what we're all here for, but we're absolutely going to cover other open source electronics topics. We're going to cover MicroPython, plain Python, and it's collated by our very own Ann engineer, and you can subscribe and read the archives at adafruitdaily.com. You can also contribute your own news or project or the project of your best friend. You can do that in a couple of ways. You can directly edit next week's draft on GitHub if you like writing Markdown and submit a pull request with your changes. You can do it on the socials. We try to monitor Mastodon, Blue Sky, and X for the hashtag CircuitPython. And you can also email cpnews@adafruit.com with your headline scoops. And if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, I really think it's a fun thing to get projects every week in your mailbox just to be a little bit inspired. The sign up is separate from your Adafruit account, and it is used only for the purpose of emailing you the newsletters that you choose. You can, of course, unsubscribe at any time. And if you like reading it on the web, the archives are at adafruitdaily.com/category/CircuitPython. So read it this week, whether it comes in your email or whether you catch up with it on the web. And that will bring us to the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. We've got our very own software known as Adabot that generates statistics over the last approximately 7 days, mostly from GitHub. And I will tell you some numbers overall, and then we'll turn it to some other folks to tell us about specific parts of the software. So overall, we had a pretty busy week last week with 42 pull requests merged by 18 authors. There are some names here that I don't recognize. Noel Anderson, thank you for your contributions. FK Sove, or FK Sove, I'm not sure how to say your name. BW Shockley, Sean the IT guy, R. Jaquette, Andy Bing. So we've also got, of course, some of the more frequent contributors as well. We also had 11 reviewers, so thanks especially to the folks who are just in the Adafruit orbit. That would be Gambler21, Relic SE, Hatak, and I guess that's it, because the kitty is our very own Ann engineer. Issues-wise, we saw a slight increase in issues across CircuitPython with 14 closed issues by 6 people and 16 open by 11 people. So thank you to everybody participating, whether it is through pull requests or issues. And with that, I will ask Scott to tell us about the core of CircuitPython.
Right, thank you, Jeff. So for the core, we had 15 pull requests merged from 13 different authors, which is awesome and more than normal, I would say. We had 6 reviewers, which is also more than normal. So thank you to Gambler21, Tack, and Relic SE for jumping in on reviews this week. We have 21 open pull requests, so we're comfortably under our goal, my goal of 1 page, which is 25 open pull requests. Many of these are drafts, and we just broke 10,000, so the highest number is 10,001, which is exciting. We have 5 closed issues by 3 people, 5 open by 3 people as well, so we're net even for 781 open issues. We use milestones to track prioritization for Adafruit-funded folks. We have 15 open issues on 10.0, which is a bit more longer-term stuff. The most urgent things right now, I think, are 9.2x still with 7 open issues. And we have 0 issues not assigned to milestones, so we are up to date as at the time of these stats. That's where we are in the core.
All right, thank you, Scott. And next, Tim will give us an update about the libraries.
Hello, thank you, Jeff. This section covers all of the CircuitPython libraries, which are kind of split into Adafruit libraries and community libraries, which each have their own bundles. The Adafruit libraries are all found on GitHub under names like Adafruit_CircuitPython_, and then the name of whatever library it is. Across, or I should say, starting out with the numbers this week for the libraries, we have 348 libraries in the Adafruit bundle, and we have 152 in the community bundle. So that does bring us back up to 500 libraries total. So we have crested that mark again, which is cool to see. In the past 7 days, we had 24 pull requests merged by 7 different authors. A couple of the names that are newer or less frequent or just not recognized by my eye as frequent contributors. Those folks in libraries this week, thanks to Samantaz Fox, to R. Jaquette, and Noel Anderson. Thanks to those folks again who might be newer, less frequent, or just have a name that I don't happen to recognize. Thank you to our other authors as well. And we had 6 reviewers this week as well. Thanks to TechTrick, Jeff, Lady Ada, the Kitty, Scott, and myself. Of the pull requests that were merged this week, there were a couple of them that were on the older side. The oldest one was 69 days, and down on the newer end, like usual, we did have the newest handful were all 1 day old. We had, that leaves us at the end of the week with 53 pull requests remaining open. The oldest one of those is 893 days, and the newest one is 1 day. Over the past week, we had 7 issues closed by 4 people, with 6 new issues opened up by 4 people. And that leaves us right now with 682 open issues across all of the Adafruit libraries. And there are 3 of those currently that are labeled Good First Issue, which you could find listed out over at circuitpython.org/contributing, which is the website where you should head if you are interested in getting involved in CircuitPython. On the first thing that you see when you load that page, you'll get a list of open PRs, which is actually the place where we tend to point folks first if you want to get involved with the project. On that list, you'll find open PRs, which are waiting for someone to come along and review them. So what we tend to point folks towards who want to get going is look through that list of PRs, find something that is interesting to you or that you've got the hardware for, that you believe you have the ability to test out or take a look over the code. Click through to GitHub and do just that. Look at the code for syntax, spelling, logic, anything like that. Leave a comment on GitHub letting us know that you looked it over and what you found. If you do have the hardware and you're able to test it out, let us know that as well in your comment and how it went. Once you do that a couple of times, if you would like to get leveled up to leaving official reviews on GitHub, we can work with you to make that happen. And then if you get to the point where you would like to start doing some coding yourself, also on circuitpython.org/contributing, along the top, there are some navigation links. If you click over to the issues list, you'll be taken to a similar list of links over to GitHub, but these ones are issues. They do not have an associated change that has been proposed yet. So they are waiting for someone to come along and actually do the work to submit the change that fixes whatever the bug is or adds the new feature or the enhancement or whatever it may be for that particular issue. So again, if you do want to get started with this, one of the easiest ways is just look through there, find something that you're interested in, find something that you have the hardware for, click through, read about the issue, figure out what the bug is or what the new feature that's been requested is, and go ahead and take a crack at implementing it and then submitting a PR with your own changes. We have a guide to contributing to CircuitPython using Git and GitHub. So we can help you out with that stuff. We also have folks who are around throughout the week on Discord who are more than happy to help get you going. So if you would like to contribute, but you feel like you're having trouble with any part of the process, be it the version control or the actions, checks, or anything else, please come say hi on Discord. Let us know what's up, and we'd be happy to help you. And then I'll leave you with the new and updated libraries for the last 7 days. New libraries over in the community bundle this week. There is a driver for the PCA 9955B. There's a new library for generating some buzzer music from little basic buzzer devices, and also the CircuitPython CSV library. It's got an update over there in the community bundle. So check those out if any of those interest you. And that is what we've got for libraries this week. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Well, we've spent a lot of time. Oh, I've got one more thing before we wrap this up. Some statistics about Blinka. Blinka is our CircuitPython compatibility layer that runs on Raspberry Pi, other Linux single-board computers, a couple of USB I/O expanders, as well as on MicroPython. And these statistics say that there were 3 pull requests merged by one author with 2 reviewers. and that there are 18 open pull requests. Issues-wise, I've got 2 closed issues by 1 person and 5 issues open by 4 people, leaving 125 open issues, and the number of supported boards stands at 146. And because I've actually been doing some work on Blinka that's not reflected here, I'm realizing that I need to possibly create a bug report against Adabot to find out why it isn't collecting statistics. So there have been some other pull requests in some newer Blinka-related GitHub repositories that aren't reflected here. And yeah, with that, we'll wrap up and head over to Hug Reports. Hug Reports is a chance to highlight folks in the CircuitPython community and beyond for doing awesome things. I'll start, and then we'll go down the list of Hug Reports alphabetically. And for anybody who isn't here in the meeting or who's marked themselves as text only, I'll read out the notes as we get to them. So, I wanted to give a hug report to Paul Cutler for pumping out episodes of the CircuitPython show and for having the stamina to record 4 episodes this week, including an episode where I'm one of the guests. So that will air sometime later this spring. Thank you to ADCC for this morning reviving an old question that got me motivated to gather some hard data. I don't have the name here, but I owe a big thank you to someone on GitHub who is contributing audio out support for the ESP32 and I think ESP32S2. That'll be exciting when it goes in. And finally, over the weekend, Damien of MicroPython helped me get a pull request into shape and merged it, so thank you to you. Next up, I have some notes from C. Grover, who thanks Paul Cutler for the invitation to join the CircuitPython Show podcast to talk about my weather station obsession. Very therapeutic. And I think that may actually be the latest episode that just released. Likewise, C. Grover has a thank you to DJ Devon3 for 2 recent playground notes, namely the NTP clock and Sunton display. I always pick up a useful code snippet or 2 from Devon's projects. Finally, C. Grover has a hug for Sam Blenny for the greenhouse temperature logger playground note with an excellent example of how to incorporate ESP32S3 sleep mode, also with bonus analytics CSV files and spreadsheets. And next up is Dan, and after that I have some more notes to read out from other folks.
All right, thanks. Thanks to Marshall Miller, who submitted a PR, which will probably merge quite soon, to do DAC audio output on Espressif, which we've been waiting for several years. There were some stumbling blocks. And also they did some more WAV file support, another format of WAV files. That's really great. Thank you, Marshall Miller. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, it's Marshall Miller who I was thinking of, and I'm the one who stumbled a couple of years ago on adding this feature. So they picked up something that I wasn't able to do, and that makes it extra special in my heart. All right, next I've got notes from DJ Devon3, who writes, a hug for Dan H. for helping with a bitmap saver issue on the Sunton display. A hug to Tanut for writing init sequences and board ports for a variety of Sunton boards. It made getting the display running on CircuitPython much easier. A hug to Neradoc for some good discussion on the Sunton boards and how to possibly improve some implementations. A hug for Snaky MakerCat for their initial commit for a Daisy Seed build. And finally, hugs for Paul Cutler and C. Grover for an amazing CircuitPython show episode. Next up, notes from ADCC, who has a hug for Dan for helpful feedback on ramlog and logging in general, and one for me for taking a closer look at RP2PIO scaling, clock scaling, and jitter. Now we've got notes from Foamy Guy, and then I will read some notes from Paul.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Hug reports for me this week. Thanks to Maker Melissa for reviewing some PRs to Blinka Display.io and the WebIDE that I've been working on lately. Thanks to Liz as well for lots of help and direction, writing product guides and creating the assets that go along with that. And a group hug for everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I have some notes from Paul Cutler, and then it's on to Scott after that. Paul writes, a group hug for everyone who has listened and helped share the CircuitPython show. All right, we're ready for Scott, then I'll round out the section with one more set of notes to read.
Sounds good. First, I have a group hug to everybody who has contributed to CircuitPython, particularly those who have done PRs or issues and helped us get to number 10,000. Second, just a hug to Timonsku, who's been dropping by my deep dive chats and has done Zephyr work before and giving me lots of tips and tricks. So thanks to them.
Okay, and Toddbot writes group hug. So thank you to everybody. It's lovely hearing what you appreciated, and I think, yeah, it's the most important part of this meeting in my heart, really. But now we come to the other most important part, which is status updates. This is another round robin where we're taking the time to let people know what we're doing. So take a moment to talk about what you've been up to since you last checked in, as well as what you're going to be working on in the immediate future. And if anything starts to become more of a discussion than just a report, we will move that down to the In the Weeds section. So I will read, and then Dan will follow. A change that a pull request that I opened last year in MicroPython was finally merged this week. It makes the parsing of numbers slightly more compatible with standard Python, including making an invalid number like 07 not be accepted in a Python file. In the end, we also saved a bit of flash space due to reorganizing existing code, so it was really a win-win situation. More updates to Pico PIO USB, which is the library that implements USB host support on the RP2040 and RP2350. So in CircuitPython, we've improved the resource allocation. And then in the library itself, I made some changes to allow use of the third PIO block that's on the RP2350. And then the final new feature is we will be able to take advantage of a library feature that allows you to have the D plus and D minus lines in either order. And yeah, so that pull request is open and waiting for review. Things that I did last week that are released is the Python Hub 75 library for Pi 5 computers called PIO Matter. There's a new version out there that improves frame rates slightly, removes a workaround because I understood finally what I was working around, and adds some examples which copy the Linux frame buffer onto the RGB matrix panel, so you can do just one more way kind of to do graphics. You can do anything that you would be able to show on a monitor that's attached to your Raspberry Pi on the matrix. And then the final thing that I listed here is I made another release of the NeoPixel library for Pi 5 computers. And that release makes it work better if you have multiple strips on different pins, or if you update the string of LEDs multiple times in a row without doing any sleeps or delays. So that's what I've been up to. Next we'll hear from Dan, and then I'll read some notes from folks.
All right, thanks. Okay, working on a few things. I'm debugging an update to the Nina firmware, which is Nina FW firmware, which is used on Airlift Wi-Fi coprocessors. And I'm still working on it. I've got a good logging setup going, but I've narrowed it down to a certain place. Another thing that happened kind of over the weekend was that we discovered that BLE, with the latest update to ESP-IDF 532, is not working on ESP32C3. It just causes boot loops, which is a really low-level problem. So I'm going to work on that. And then I fixed an issue with DMA on Raspberry Pi 2. That code can be cleaned up some more, but it's good for now, and it fixes some showstopper bugs. And because of a bunch of bugs, I'll probably do 9.2.4 release sometime early this week, so that we get those bugs in and people can go back to using the latest version. Okay.
All right, next I've got notes from a couple of folks, and after that we'll hear from Foamy Guy. But first, DJ Devon writes, started playing with the Sunton ESP32S3 yellow display. Getting a 7-inch 800 by 480 display working with CircuitPython is pretty awesome. From a GUI design perspective, having 4 times the screen real estate is drool-worthy. I wrote a playground note for it. There's something not quite right with the colors being displayed. Green shows up as lime green and orange looks yellow. Attempting to create a screenshot resulted in an image with obvious RGB 565 color swapping issues, perhaps because there's no palette involved with a dot clock display. Needs investigation. Next up, I have notes from ADCC, who writes, testing a RAM log module that writes messages to a circular buffer in RAM. Useful for debugging where logging messages to a file or I/O device interferes with timing. Includes a Python binding that facilitates message unloading and a custom handler for logging from Adafruit logging. Using ramlog, I've been looking into a couple of RP2 port issues involving the CYW43. With a large log buffer in PSRAM, I'm able to capture detailed network traffic while not interfering with timing. Logging a message typically takes less than 30 microseconds on an RP2350. And finally, fixed an interesting issue with RP2 port MP3 streaming over Wi-Fi that manifested itself as an interrupt loop. All right, now we're ready for Tim, and then we'll round out the section with Scott's updates.
All right, thank you. I have been working on the Sparkle Motion Learn Guide. And then for actual CircuitPython stuff, I put in a couple of fixes for the web IDE for code.circuitpython.org, specifically in the USB REPL-based file handler. And then over the weekend, I prepared a library that I made a while ago called Game Controls to release in the community bundle. I had just kind of published this on GitHub bare bones, but now is a good time to publish it because while working through guide feedback on some old Learn guides, I found out that the tile map game guide I made a while ago doesn't work on current versions, but utilizing this library will allow it to. So that's my next step there, is to update that to use the new library. And that's what I've been up to. Thanks.
Thank you. And last but not least, we'll hear from Scott.
Hello. So I am still in Zephyrland, which should not be surprising. I did more work on the RA8 and the RA6 dev kits. I got Flash working, and I got SD-RAM working, which is cool. I also got my work to set up to use a custom Zephyr branch where I merge in kind of some of the support for those two boards. That'll be my plan going forward, is we'll just have like kind of like with the IDF, we'll have a few changes on top of kind of regular Zephyr, just for the things that we find. I'm working on Wi-Fi support on the NRF 7002. It took me all deep dive on Friday to realize I wasn't waiting long enough to get the scan results back. So I've been excited all weekend to get back into it. I'm going to do that right after lunch here. Note, this is also the first board with 5 gigahertz band support that I know of, so there may be a few like additional things we'll want to change in the CircuitPython API. The ESP32C5 has it as well, but I don't have one currently. Looks like they're just starting to become available. TAC merged in Zephyr support into Tiny USB, so I'm going to switch over to that and see how it goes. And then once I have networking going via Wi-Fi, I'll probably take, I don't know, probably another week to do, or at least part of a week to do Ethernet and LTE. And then once I've got that, I need to move to polishing it up so I can actually PR it and get it checked in. I do want to have some boards that we release and publish based on this port. So I'm thinking like the RA6, the RA8, the NRF 7002 development kit, and the plain NRF 5340 as well. So those newer, the 5340 and the 7002, which has a 5340 on it, won't have BLE initially, but that is definitely something I want to do after getting it pull requested, is getting Zephyr-based BLE going too. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Scott. And that closes the section of status updates. We'll move into the last section called In the Weeds, and I've got a couple of items here. Tim, why don't you go ahead and introduce your item?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask about updating code.circuitpython.org with the changes from the beta branch. I don't know for sure what all is on beta that's not in main comprehensively, but I know at least one thing, which was the one that I worked on, was the serial plotter a couple of months back. and I know we want to get some testing done on that, and there is a beta URL, but I think it's been a little while since it's come up or seen much action. So I wanted to get opinions on what, if we're interested in merging that anytime soon, and if so, like what kind of testing we want to get done more concretely to make it ready to go. I just get thoughts around that from the team.
I think this is really a question for Melissa, and it's
Okay.
probably worth you just having this conversation with her and then being able to do it yourself
Okay.
as well. So yeah, get her, chat with her, ask her what her bar is and how you want to coordinate with her. But I think because she's part-time right now, it would be good for you to be able to do it too. And you're clearly using it, so you have a feel for it as well.
Yeah, I did. I will say I did a bunch of testing on it back when I worked on the plotter, and I've used it a little bit in the last couple of days on some other stuff, but not nearly as comprehensively. So
Yeah,
will be definitely good to do some testing as well. But yeah, I will talk with her. Sounds good.
I think you should also be prepared to fix it if it if it breaks.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But I know you can. So
Yeah, that covers it for me. Thanks.
All right. Our second and final item is from Snaky Maker Cat, who's text only, so I will be reading that out. They are asking for a clarification of the status of the CircuitPython STM32 ports. I've been working on the Daisy Seed port, and it's been challenging but moving ahead. The first PR is opened. I'm in the process of adding UF2 bootloader and SDRAM support as well, and was planning to ask for help with the audio and other modules that don't seem to exist on the STM32 chips. With the new Zephyr integration, is this work becoming obsolete? Can any of it be used with Zephyr? And is there a time estimate until Zephyr takes over? Scott, I assume you have answers for some of those questions anyway.
yeah, I don't feel like the STM32 port has gotten a lot of love from us because we only have one Adafruit board that really uses it, which is the Feather F405, I think is what it is. And ST has a lot of different parts, so it's tricky to support them all. So my plan is to not do any more work on the STM32 port, but instead rely more on Zephyr. So in particular for SDRAM support, I would expect us to do Zephyr. UF2 on top of tiny UF2 within Zephyr would be awesome as well. In particular, it has a Flash API that we could target with tiny UF2 and kind of do it once. Again, do it once and be done. There is a non-trivial amount of work for the bootloader because a lot of the board definitions in Zephyr are targeted at their bootloader. Which uses a lot of Flash to have like a second backup copy, which I don't think we're going to want to do at all. So a UF2 Zephyr bootloader is something we should do, but not something that is going to be easy to do. SDRAM support is actually not too bad. I got it working on the RA8. And I would expect on the H750 to not be too bad as well. I have a H750 and I have a Daisy Seed, but the challenge I ran into when I just tried to get it going was that the internal flash is only 128K, and that's what Zephyr uses. So I ran out of room, and I wasn't able to load Zephyr CircuitPython on there, and it wasn't clear to me how to get how to do execute in place with Zephyr on it. So that's I looked at it, but didn't really get too far because of the Flash thing. I know it's possible, but I don't know the details, and I just didn't want to shift myself into that.
Scott, can you
So
just tell us briefly what the Daisy Seed is and what makes it interesting? Because I think I vaguely know, but some people probably don't.
Yeah, so the Daisy Seed is a synth-focused board from a synthesizer company called Electrosmith. And the Daisy Seed itself is quite small, kind of the size of a Pico, or like a Raspberry Pi Pico. But they have a lot of synth-related software that targets it. and it's like used in guitar pedals and things. It is an STM32H750, which is a Cortex M7, I think, that runs at like 480 megahertz. So it's like very powerful, but the internal flash is very small because it saves cost to have small internal flash. Instead, you have an external Q SPI flash chip on there. And then the other interesting thing is the SDRAM, which is a 64 megabyte SDRAM chip, I think. So, and like Snaky Maker Cat is saying, is that the internal RAM is also a megabyte. So total RAM on this board that's, I think, $25. So it's very the board itself is very inexpensive. I got it with a breakout that has like headphone jack and I2S DAC that was like $60. Still pretty good. So yeah, it's just like in this synth sphere. They've got a lot of good software support in their ecosystem as well. But yeah, the executing place is a bit of a challenge. Does that clarify that? What the board
I
is?
think that helps understand what is interesting about the board. A lot of RAM, powerful processor, and
Right.
audio people
But
love it.
Yeah, it's quite popular, I think, for that synth world. So with the new Zephyr integration, is this work becoming obsolete? That's my long-term goal. In the short term, it's not. You also asked, can any of it be used with Zephyr? So this is an interesting question because my hope is that CircuitPython implementations that are modules that are not supported by a kind of a universal Zephyr API. So like maybe Pulse IO, right? Or Count IO or Frequency IO or something like that, where like Zephyr doesn't have an API that we would just build it on top of. I do want to use the vendor HAL versions of it that we kind of would do now. But for audio, for like I2S, I think they have I2S already in Zephyr, so that's what I would target first. And then, the last question Snaky Maker Cat has is there a time estimate for until Zephyr takes over? So it's taken over my development time already. We won't replace the STM port or any of the other ports until we have feature parity of those things. And ST would be nice to get replaced, but it's probably not Adafruit's top priority. The two that are on my radar for making sure we're feature complete are Nordic for BLE in particular, but because for a while we'll have a split between Nordic support with the Nordic port and the Zephyr port, because the newer chips will do on the Zephyr port. So that'll be kind of a forcing function to put time into getting Nordic kind of unified on top of Zephyr. And then the other one that Lamore's mentioned is IMX RT, which is kind of in the similar vein as the ST chips, where like we could do boards with an IMX that has SD RAM, for example. And we have the IMX Metro already. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was another one that we spent more time on sooner. Yeah, I would like to replace the ST port, but I think it's still in that like not super high priority bin or bucket, unfortunately.
And just to turn this into a little bit of plug, are you continuing to cover this stuff on your deep dives on Fridays?
Yeah, totally. It's just whatever I've been working on, and it's a great play. If this teases folks into wanting to know more about my Zephyr plans and timeline and stuff, like that's another good place to ask. In the Weeds is a great place to ask it as well. Because starting in May, my schedule's going to get a little more funny when I go on leave again. So, but I really do want to get in the next few weeks. I'd like to get the Zephyr port at least checked in.
Yeah, it had crossed my mind that maybe you had a draft version ready to go for pull request 10,000, but That was not the case. That was just happening in my brain.
I just had a couple I've had a couple things that should have been simpler than they were. Like I spent 3 hours chasing a thing where I had like changed the device instance number from 0 to 1 for one board, and the other board that I was testing on needed it back to 0. And then the Wi-Fi scanning stuff where I was just not waiting. But that's how it goes.
That's software development in a nutshell.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're in the weeds of the weeds now. Is it all right if I go ahead and wrap up?
Let me say one other thing is that
Yeah.
I am pushing all my Zephyr work to my personal Tannewt CircuitPython. So if folks are interested in including you, Snaky Maker Cat, and you want to try to get it working with Zephyr instead, you're more than welcome to do that, and I'm happy to help you try to do that. So if you're like, I want to add SDRAM support, and I understand all the execute and play stuff, like maybe your time would be better spent getting it working on Zephyr. So let me know, or if folks wanted to play around with it, it is all pushed. It's just like I'm not really able to release boards yet based on it. But you can build any of the Zephyr boards. There's also no Zephyr board definition for the Daisy seed, so that's why I got the 750 discovery kit from ST as well.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for all that info, Scott. Kind of getting
2 hours of this on
record, as it were. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up the meeting for today. This has been the CircuitPython Weekly for January 27th, 2025. A big thank you to everybody who participated, and a big thank you to everybody who's listening and watching after the fact. If you want to support Adafruit and CircuitPython, and folks like Scott who work on CircuitPython, consider purchasing from the Adafruit shop at adafruit.com. The video of this meeting will be released on YouTube at youtube.com/Adafruit, and the podcast will be available on major podcast services. It will also be featured in the Python for Microcontrollers newsletter. Visit adafruitdaily.com to subscribe. The next meeting, I forgot to check beforehand. I believe will be held next Monday as usual at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Although we do have President's Day coming up. I'm not sure the status of that. So check the calendar. It is linked in the show notes. And don't believe me. All right. The meeting is held, whatever day it is, on the Adafruit Discord, which you can join by going to adafru.it/discord. If you want to speak in the meeting, if you want to hear about any changes to the time or day, you can ask to be added to the CircuitPythonistas role on Discord. It doesn't cost anything, just 2 or 3 notification bells a week will ring on your computer. And with that, I can only say we hope to see you all next week, and thanks again to everybody who participated.